Welcome everybody to another episode of The Discarded Compass. I'm your host, John Lynch, and we have a great guest for you tonight, Eric Putkonen. Eric, how are you?
Great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on the show. And it was a bit short notice and you obliged fairly well, which is, I appreciate that, you know. So where are you from? Actually, Philadelphia, was it?
No, I'm from St. Petersburg, Florida.
Okay, you're living in...
I've been living down here, I don't know, about 3 years. So it's nice.
Wherever you go, you are, yeah?
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah. I remembered having all my stuff in a Penske truck driving down here, and there was a definite feeling of not really going anywhere.
I mean, it mustn't have always been like that. I mean, it must have been different years ago. You know, there must have been a time where you were where you were egoic, or, you know.
Yeah. Well, like everybody, it starts out that way. And, had the typical building the whole sense of I, family, growing up, school. Yeah, it's a pretty typical scenario for everybody.
And it happens at a young age, obviously. Probably some people say 3 or 4.
I suspect even younger than that is where the ego starts to form. Because I mean, even before 3, some infants, when you call out their name, they'll turn and look. They're starting to get a feel for this name is referring to me.
Yeah, that's true. I've never thought of that, actually. Yeah, a bit the baby can take in the sounds of the name and
Mm-hmm.
Is that terrible? Is that a terrible thing to happen? To become egoic, to suffer, because when you become egoic, or you get the sense of I mean, it's inevitable, isn't it, really? I think Ramana Maharshi said that it's inevitable.
I think it is definitely not something that's bad. I mean, potentially, I would think there'd be almost more harm if you try to raise a child totally non-egoic. Because, I mean, in school, it's definitely not it's not civilized in school. So, I mean, a very non-egoic child will be eaten alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that reminds me. Yeah.
I mean, losing the ego is far easier when it's a civilized society. And there's people not constantly trying to do harm or take advantage of you or mess with you or whatever.
Yeah, it's a bit of a rat race, and the thrive to survive and to reach the top, obviously, is another thing we could talk forever about. And the same thing can happen in the spiritual circles. People can become, I'm more enlightened than you, or I'm really enlightened, and you're not enlightened because you think you're not enlightened, and you are enlightened because you don't really care too much. You know, I mean, it gets really ridiculous. But what happened to you as such for this new way of seeing to occur?
Well, I mean, the short story is it was just the grace of enlightenment happened, where it was a seeing through the illusions. But I mean, I started out, I guess, growing up the typical way, but I've always had an interest and curiosity in what really was going on. Ever since as a child, there's always been this feeling of there's more to it than this, and I'm missing something. And so, I started studying, unusual topics like, parapsychology and, a bunch of other stuff as a child. By the time I got finally in the teens and stuff, I finally got some exposure to spirituality. And so that started the spiritual search. And I did that for 13 odd years, reading anything that seemed interesting. Funny enough, never read anything about non-duality and not really much about enlightenment. I mean, I'd heard the term enlightenment and awakening, but there were so many conflicting definitions and stuff. I wasn't really sure what they were talking about, and I kind of doubted it even existed. And so, but after about 13 years of this spiritual search, I gave up because it seemed like every new book seemed to be a rehash of something I'd read before. And in this exhaustion and futility of the search, I just kind of quit searching. So I quit meditating. I quit reading new books. I just gave up. But I'd been in the spiritual circles long enough to know about synchronicities and such. And so if something keeps popping up in life, I know to pay attention to it. And so about a year or so after I kind of gave up, Eckhart Tolle's name kept popping up. And so I'm like, okay, I get the feeling I need to get acquainted with his stuff in some way, and I loathe to read another book. So I cheated and I went to the library and got a video. This was the idea at the time.
Yeah.
But during the video, a lot of it was stuff I heard before. He's talking about being present, and I had thought I had been present in the past, but that was the point. That was the point. It was you can't think your way to the present.
Yeah.
But during the video, he talked about having the body and really getting in touch with the kinesthetic feeling of the body. And so when I was playing with that, a kind of a profound presence hit where thought died down to nothing. And this kind of scenario had happened before. I remember when I visited Machu Picchu, just being awed by the scene so much that I didn't have a thought in my head for 15 minutes. And there's times throughout everybody's lives where thoughts die. So this wasn't new to me. So it wasn't like, oh, the first time I was present, something happened. No, I've been present before. But in this profound presence, after watching this video of getting in touch with, the moment and kinesthetically experiencing, feeling it, things just kind of clicked. And so, just kind of saw through the illusion of me and kind of the nature of reality. And in the video, he mentioned Ramana Maharshi. And so then I went over and got a book by Ramana Maharshi, and everything that Ramana talked about seemed to just resonate. It's like, yeah, that was exactly what happened. And so that was kind of how it worked for me, I guess.
And as such, you didn't end up getting anything. I mean, I think I listened to a video there where you sort of described it like a veil dropping, as such.
Yeah, it was kind of like a veil dropping because you have all these concepts in your head that you often think you understand, but the veil is kind of like you're staring at a map and the map drops away and you actually see the scene going, oh, I now get it. And so the veil was just my own concepts. It was stuff that was getting in the way.
and how could you be sure that those concepts had dropped? That's the thing. I mean,
well, I mean, it was a very deep, it was visceral seeing. It was arising from one's being, basically, that I could tell that the me was an illusion, and all the stuff associated with it was an illusion. And it kind of made perfect sense at that point. I mean, when somebody goes, well, how could you know? Well, all I could say is you kind of know. When it drops away, you're like, oh, I get it. But it was just the things I had read about or heard about just kind of clicked in place, and such that I kind of understood what was going on. And I wasn't really searching for enlightenment, didn't expect it to happen. And when it happened, I kind of went, okay, I knew something happened. Suffering fell away, thought by and large fell away. And it never really returned. And so I think that's been kind of more of the proof when people go, well, how do you know? It's like, well, the stuff didn't come back. It didn't go away.
Yeah, what was false fell away. It's like neti approach, isn't it? It's like, it's not like, there was someone really, and then it fell away. There was never anyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that, yeah, it wasn't like the me goes, oh, I got it now. It's the very illusion of me just drops away. It's like, oh, this has always been the case. Okay, I get it. They always talk about the wave and ocean analogy, and it's like, and I sometimes clarify. I'm like, well, the wave never becomes the ocean or realizes it's the ocean. It's the ocean realizes it's always been the ocean.
Yeah, yeah. It's a slippery. It's a phantom. It's a slippery phantom of a thing. The ego. I mean, look, as soon as you try to lose it, you are it. And, you can't be the presence or the absence.
Yeah.
It's absolutely an astounding, but that's not true either. It wouldn't matter much what I call it. A trap of consciousness to not know itself and to play these different characters.
Well, I wouldn't even really call it a trap either, but I mean, it's a lot
yeah,
of it's just built on very, very understandable, incorrect assumptions based on misconception and belief. We come to, and some of it we just gained from growing up. So, the whole learning what we're taught from our elders and peers and everything else. So the conditioning carries through, and it seems to reinforce the ideas and assumptions we come up with. Because the whole idea of me, a lot of times I find people are basing that on what I'm consciously aware of, what I can control. And these are very natural assumptions. I mean, yeah, if I can control this and I can't control that, it seems separate. If my conscious awareness is only aware of these senses, I'm not aware of what this other body mind senses, it seems like they're separate. But the same thing applies when you're dreaming at night. When you're dreaming at night, you only have that one character you're playing. And that one character can only control what it can control, and only that character can see what it can see. But that doesn't make the entire dream not be one consciousness. It all arose from one consciousness. There's nobody else in the dream. There's no one else in the dream. And so, these natural assumptions, come up from, we tag a lot of faith to, I must be separate for these reasons.
yeah, it's everything's an afterthought, isn't it?
Yep.
It's like it's astounding. For me, it's like the trap. When I meant by trap, it was like if you try to drop it, you become someone that's trying to drop it, and if you try not to drop it, you become someone that's not dropping anything. It's all you could do is laugh about it.
That kind of feeling is kind of summed up in an old, I think it was, I can't remember if it was Taoist or Zen, but they said, somebody asked, how do you get in accord with the way? And the master answered, to try to accord is to deviate.
I could just imagine the guy that he said that to. Astounded, completely flummoxed.
Yeah, it's like you're stuck either way.
Yeah, stuck.
But really the which actually puts you to the reverse side, because then Alan Watts comes along, and one of his talks, he goes, as long as you're free to be stuck or unstuck, then you're unstuck. Only when you think that you're not free to be either way and you must be unstuck at all times, then you're stuck.
Yeah, you have to be unstuck but not stuck. Yeah, it's a sticking point, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, we can laugh at these things because we've some sort of insights, but to be a life force such that's constantly occurring, there's nothing really to be said, and that doesn't mean it's dull, does it? It's like it's quite effortless, isn't it? Sense of being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the sense of being is effortless, of a really natural state. So I mean, and being it's natural, it's not this grand thing.
Yeah. Yeah, like, but there's fireworks going off and you're meeting God. And I mean, I've read books where people had spiritual experiences and they went into the light, and interesting enough, you're not even the light either, because you're aware of the light. You're actually the darkness that sees the light. because only for the darkness there couldn't be light. It's quite into all these things that you read about are quite fascinating.
Well, if you want to think about that a slightly different way,
Yeah.
You got to remember that outer space appears to be utter blackness only because there isn't an object. But as soon as there's an object, there's light because now there's reflection.
Yeah.
All the light has always been there, but it appears dark.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the same thing. That's a bit too much, isn't it? Isn't that the contrast, how the mind works? It divides like light and dark. It divides it, completely divides it up.
Yeah, it always tries. Well, it's always there's it's a natural thing of the divisive mind to try to have these contrasts, but also try to conceptualize in some way, and any conception is always going to have holes and be incomplete, and so it's never quite right either.
And is it that is it that conceptualization that keeps the mind alive as such? Because there's no mind, is there? Is it conceptualization that is the mind?
Mind is, I think, just the standard term we use for the stream of thought. As long as there's, thinking arising, we think there's a mind that's doing the thinking. But really, mind is just the label for the stream of thought, because when they're in the absence of thought, there's no mind. Kind of in the same way in the East when they talk about no mind. If you had ever seen the movie The Last Samurai, but there's this one point where the character Westerner is learning swordsmanship, and he's paying attention to the guy who's attacking him, and he hears the crowd kind of laughing, and he's noticing all that, and he's getting just kind of the crap kicked out of him basically, and the guy one of his friends in the village runs up and he goes, no, you have too many mind. You're minding the opponent. You're minding the audience. You're minding yourself. No mind. And it was kind of the pointer that you're thinking too much about all this other stuff. Don't pay it any mind. And when there's an absence of thought, you're not paying anything any mind. There's no mind.
Yeah. And if you try to have no mind, you're in again.
Well, you can't try to have no mind, because that's fighting the mind, and nothing agitates the mind more than resisting it.
Yeah. So how would someone approach this, Eric? What tips would you give them?
Approaching no mind or being very present?
Yeah.
Usually there's a few different ways. I know Ramana Maharshi, he taught self-inquiry. Who am I? And, he even said the primary purpose of that was to bring silence of mind. It was just to silence the mind. So a thought arises and you go, who has this thought? I do. Who am I? And you just follow it right to the I thought, follow it to the source, and the source is silence. So that's one way to quiet the mind. Due to my exposure with Eckhart Tolle, the one I kind of like is just being 100% devoted to the experiencing and feeling of what's going on. Similar to how in Zen, they'll say, watch your breath, which early in my spiritual journey, that caused nothing but misery, because I'd be mentally trying to observe my breath. I'd be counting my breath and mentally observing. And that's not what you're really supposed to be doing at all. It's feeling the breath. And so, do you feel the air going past the lips and through the nostrils? Do you feel the chest expand? Do you feel all this stuff going on? But you don't have to focus just on the breath. You can feel everything. It's like, do you feel your own heartbeat? Do you feel the pulse? What's the alignment of the body? How much tension is there? There's so much to be aware of. And I find this is a good portal, because there's so much depth available. Science has said conscious awareness is only aware of, say, 10 bytes a second, but there's millions of bytes of information going on. I mean, there's so much going on. The conscious mind could never grasp it all. And in that way, there's a lot you could potentially become aware of. And so it's kind of like on one side of the spectrum, the conscious awareness only has so much bandwidth. So on one side of the spectrum, somebody could be so deep in thought and thinking that they could slam right into a lamp pole because they simply were no longer aware. They didn't see it in front of them. You could be on the other side of the spectrum. You could be so with the now, experiencing it, feeling it, how all the stuff that's going on, that there's just no room for thought. And I find that works better for me, is just totally being 100% devoted to the moment, feeling it, experiencing it, and keeping kind of also the knowledge or understanding that any thought that arises can only be about the past, the future, or pure imagination. Thought can't touch the now. Experience is the direct experience of now is about as close as you can get. Thinking about it is an afterthought. It comes in afterwards. The thought that had happened, the thought that of what might happen a moment to come, or just daydreaming. And knowing that if the focus is on the present moment, if a thought arises, you just don't really pay it any mind, and you just go, I don't really care about that. I'm more concerned with now. And for somebody who's trying to kind of get into presence and no mind, it's difficult at first because we've conditioned ourselves that as soon as there's a moment of silence, this is when the mind should, or the brain should come forward with things we had forgotten, or things that need more attention. And many of us have experienced it at some point in life where in a moment of silence, something comes to mind. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about doing that. Well, now you're just reinforcing. Good job, brain. You reminded me in this moment of silence. I need to do this, and off you go in the next project. And in that way, we're just constantly making ourselves busy, busy, busy. But we're constantly reinforcing. In a moment of silence, give me stuff that I should be paying attention to. Then we decide to start meditating and become present, and we're sitting and we're like, why are all these thoughts coming? Well, that's the conditioning. In a moment of silence, give me all this stuff. And so as we're being very, very present, at first, yeah, there will be very, very appetizing, seductive thoughts that will come up. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And so if you're trying to practice being present or no mind, no matter how seductive the thought, you just got to kind of ignore it and go, I'll do it. I'll think about this afterward, after I'm done sitting or after this practice or whatever. But for now, I don't care. And in that way, you're trying to build a kind of a new protocol or condition in the brain to go, you don't need to fill up silence. You can allow it just to be silent. And then over time, the brain kind of catches on. The brain's a bit like a tanker. It's slow to turn. So it takes a little bit of practice, but eventually the brain goes, oh, I don't need to fill up all the silence with something. And then you'll find that you can just sit and be fully aware and no mind and not think. And it's not a big deal. But it may take a while.
You mentioned you were reading books when you were younger, and just when you were talking there, I was listening, and you reminded me of the fact that usually we look outward, even in religion, we're looking outwards to things. In life, we're captured by objects, materialism. The mind is captured. And advertising plays on this very well, I mean, sales myself, so I mean, I kind of do it myself. But there comes a point, even in your life, you spoke about it, where we stop looking outward, and suddenly we start to look inward. And like Ramana Maharshi, you mentioned him, it's like the search for enlightenment is like stirring the stick in the fire. And the stick eventually burns out while you stir it. And while you're looking inwards, it's like using a thorn to pick out a thorn, And like, I'm just saying, I think that's a really, you kind of touched on it there. That's an important aspect of the search. You could say that suddenly you look in, and the mind doesn't want that, does it? I mean, I talk to people sometimes that have no clue about non-duality or enlightenment, and I can sense it. The mind will. Usually it's three standard answers. I wouldn't think that deep. Oh, I don't have time for that now. Oh, that's very complicated. It's always it's a standard, it's a standard reply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the standard replies, I guess, are a bit of maybe a defense mechanism, but I mean, it's the illusory me, the idea of me being the thinker, being overly enamored and focusing on thought. These are all substantiated and strengthened by struggle and resisting what is and trying to get into the future or trying to get away or fixing the past. all this stuff helps strengthen it. So if you just say cease doing, just be still, be silent, be fully aware, not even thinking. Yeah, the mind really doesn't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't.
And neither do people, really.
No,
Because I mean,
and they sense it. Yeah. Yeah.
Because well, as soon as you say, be still, be silent, cease doing, they're like, well, how is that going to do anything? And it's like, well, the point is, it's not. You're not trying to do something. You're trying to cease what you've already been doing to see what's behind that.
Yeah. Yeah. And to find the doer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, because I mean, if we're constantly, looking at thought and daydreaming and thinking about past and future, that's a lot of awareness of our attention being removed from what's going on around us. Like I said, you can be so deep in thought that you could stumble into somebody because you just didn't see them. And so, instead of basically it's a lot of a ceasing to do. It's like, well, I know that I have this tendency to engage with thought, so I'm just going to cease doing that. And, if you cease doing, all you're left with is the present moment. If you cease doing, all you're left is with acceptance, because it's our active resistance and denial that we just need to cease doing.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, that we cease doing it. And what would you say after that?
Well, I mean, a lot of times I turn a lot of stuff on its head to turn it, because I know one of the, in spiritual traditions and teachers and everything, it's common to talk about what to do. And so they'll say, well, you should, you should be detached. So you should practice detachment, or you should practice acceptance, or you should practice forgiveness. And yeah, it's on the surface, it sounds good, but these are all things for me to do. And they'll be limitedly successful if you practice it as such. But really, if you look at it deep down, the only reason you need to forgive is because of something you're holding on to from the past. If you cease holding on to it, you don't need to forgive anymore. If the only resistance and denial is of the present. And so if you cease resisting and denying, well, then it's already accepted and allowed. It is recognizing that the stuff that we're told to practice in a weird way can be interpreted, and often is interpreted as, I should do this to counter this, but they don't realize this that they're trying to counter is something they're already doing. So you're now doing something to counter something you're doing. And so I usually try to flip it over, because I'm like, well, really what you need to just do is just realize what you're doing and cease doing that.
Yeah, it's to preempt the whole struggle.
Yeah. And when you cease doing something, that's not particularly egoic, because the doing is the egoic. To cease doing and not do is not egoic. It's kind of like, it's kind of like the comparison between, say, silence and noise. We never create silence. We just cease making noise, and then there's silence.
Yeah.
The same thing with peace. We don't really create peace. We just cease struggling and conflict and fighting. When you cease fighting, there's peace.
Yeah. Well, they will say both sides will say they're fighting for peace.
Well, the thing is, there's no way to fight for peace. It just doesn't work that way.
I mean, tell these geniuses what in World War III, whatever they're doing now. Yeah, that's the thing. It's a crazy world. But is the ego the cause of all these problems that we're having, or is it just is it played out someone said that it was all what's happening is like God having a dream.
Yeah,
and he doesn't even know that he's dreamt this. It's just dreamt. He can't even do anything about it, or it can't do anything about it, because it's just spontaneously being dreamt out. That's quite mind blowing. I mean, that means
that is one way to point at it. But if you think about it even further, really what it is all the dream characters are being played by that one consciousness or God. And it is their It is the actions of each that are creating the dream to be as it is.
It's the action. So you're saying on one hand, well, you're not. You're making a complete one statement.
Well, I'm just saying the dream is as it is because of all the individual actions of all the characters.
Yeah.
The only reason something is built is because a group got together and built it, whether that's a dream or not. But and so in one sense, you could say God can't do anything about it, in the sense that there's no third point of view that's almighty that can come in and go, I will fix this all. That can't happen. If it's going to be fixed, it's going to be done through all the individual characters of the dream.
Well, that are powered and played by the dream.
I mean, God, which is playing all the characters of the dream, through the characters of the dream, may go, we don't like this anymore. We're going to act as a group and change things. That would be God changing it, but not as directly as people imagine God acting.
Yeah, but even those changing, them changes don't mean anything because they're a dream-like change.
Well, it doesn't mean anything in the absolute sense, and that nothing is gained or lost.
Yeah.
But while you're dreaming, it means something. For the dream characters within the dream, it means,
well, apparently, yeah.
Basically, love or hate, war or peace. That's what it really means for them. The thing is, that's the nature of all games. If you think about it in terms of when you're playing games, is anything ever really ultimately gained or lost? No. Yeah. But you're still going to try to win. You're going to still try to, you're still looking for the joy of it. If it's a cooperative game, you're all cooperating to achieve goals. But is there a real point? Is it serious? Is it something no, it's not serious. You're not really accomplishing anything. Nothing's really gained or lost.
Yeah.
But you still do it for the joy of it. And in the same way, in a dream, the characters of the dream could go, we're going to do this to make this change, for just the simple enjoying that. If it changes, we'll enjoy how things change.
Yeah, enjoy the ride.
Not that it makes it suddenly serious, but that you gain something, because when the dream's over, it's over.
See, this is it.
Nothing's permanent, so you can't grasp it and go, we've accomplished it.
Yeah, and like being president of America, that's fine, that's okay. That dream will go too, and being a street cleaner in Washington, that dream will go as well. Or sitting on a couch doing nothing all day, that's the same importance.
But it's all the same importance. But the thing is I find life is play, and you can just say, well, there's real no gain or loss, so why do anything, and kind of remain aloof. But that's kind of, the game doesn't end even if you decide to try to cease playing. You're still playing just another game in doing that. But it's kind of like, I guess it's opposing paradigms of thought, because Alan Watts had once talked in one of his lectures where he goes, people have this idea that we must clean, purify, remove things. It's almost like they think the ultimate goal is we should get down to a nice clean rock, and that's what's left of the planet. nice, clean, perfectly sterling polished rock. But he goes, if you realize the world is a play, you can then live it up. It's like, well, great. I believe in color. I believe in we don't need to go in black and white. We can go in color. Just for the joy of it, not because you're gaining anything out of it. And so even a street cleaner, in Washington, as you said, they could just be a normal street cleaner and drudge through their day, or they could see there's another way of saying, well, this is the way I'm interacting, and they can actually see that they're making people's lives better. There's these two viewpoints, are just tint the way we're living in the world in terms of whether you add a minus or a plus to it.
Okay, so we obviously I went off in a bit of trying to you go down those rabbit holes, which there are thousands. But the sense of authorship is the thing, isn't it? We need to get to that. Who's driving the dream bus, as someone said once.
Well, you never see who's driving it. Just as when you're dreaming at night, the dreamer is never revealed. I mean, even the character you believe yourself to be is part of the dream. It's also the part of the dreamed, no different than any other character in the dream. And so the dreamer is never really revealed as another object, another third point of view that's all knowing, all seeing, whatever. But
I mean, who would view it anyway? I mean, it'd be like,
who would view it? I mean, really, it comes down to just realizing that, that there really is no separation, that it is kind of all a dream, and there is choice. We all have choice whether we want to do things. Do we have actual, I mean, choice is just one aspect. There's also randomness. Yeah. There's also conditioning. There's things going on as well, but there's choice as well. So I've never really denied the idea of choice or free will, but I've just denied that there is a chooser per se. Somebody could say, "Well, I'm the chooser." Instead, there's just choices being made.
There's choices, no chooser.
There's events happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like you might as well make choices. You might as well do what you're going to do post awakening, you can say, because it doesn't matter. And it's like, oh yeah, sure, choices are just choices. There's nobody making choices.
Well, I mean, that's where you get into. I tend to talk from the standpoint of free will and choice. But really, you can go either direction, because I know the more normal traditional way is to say everything's predetermined, scripted. There's no free will. There's no choice. There's no doer. And really, you can say that you could say nothing is chosen and everything is fated, or you could say everything is chosen, or there's choice and everything is, as the self wants, basically. So you could say everything is more or less chosen, or nothing is chosen. You can go either way. The difficulty and problems arise when you try to get choosy and say, I chose this, but I did not choose that. that's where a me kind of creeps in, and preferences arise and all this other stuff happens. And so, I'll say, there's free choice and there's choice. That happens. But I'll say, each dream character will choose based on their current understanding. But also if it's a group choice, like an election, that also was done. It's kind of like, put it this way, in consciousness, I'm kind of combining dream and life at the same time. But let's say, during the 2016 election, the U.S. won with Trump and Hillary. As Eric, the character individual, voted for Hillary. So that was the self, which you could say self-consciousness, Brahman, ultimate reality, pick your label, really doesn't matter. But in Advaita, they'll talk about everything's the self or everything's Brahman. But we'll say, as the self, through Eric, voted for Hillary. But the self, as the entire populace of the United States, voted for Trump. Those are not contrary. They're like, because some people go, well, how would the self vote for Hillary and then vote for Trump at the same time? I'm like, character, masses. It's all one thing. If this was a dream and there was an election in the dream, some characters would vote one way, some characters would vote the other. Regardless of the result, it was still the decision of the consciousness, which is the entirety of the dream.
Yeah, it's a bit like when you said, like, I chose that, the individual person, if you wrapped it all what you said, the voting scenario, into the fact of one individual person, I chose that, but not that. It's the same sort of a thing.
Well, it's
like I voted for Trump. I voted for Hillary, but I didn't vote for Trump.
Well, I voted for Trump, but in the end, I also I voted for Trump. I voted for Hillary, but I elected Trump.
Yeah.
I did both of those things.
Yeah. See, we put importance on to it's quite, and then the important is
and
the
then
importance.
and knowing that there's no individuals, it's like I know fully well that this character might have voted for Hillary, but me as other characters voted for Trump. There's really no separation. It's like the entirety of the votes was also my decision.
And you can't pre-think a thought, can you, as well? I mean, you can't pre-think a thought. You can't pre-think a thought. I'm going to have this thought. Like, even that can't be pre-thought, what I just said, because it just happened once.
Yeah.
It's
but I mean, I usually talk from like I said, free will, but also, there's a bit of spontaneity. So it's ad lib and improv. And it's kind of like when children are say a child is playing with dolls and they act out a scenario between these two dolls. They really don't know the direction it's going.
Yeah.
They're just acting it out, and they just play each perspective as if the two are not aware of each other.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in dreams. The same thing is what reality is like. It's just consciousness, self, Brahman, pick your term, playing all the parts. And the belief that I'm an individual, I am separate is the illusion, because nothing has really ever been separate.
And that's the thing. Nothing has ever been separate.
Yeah. There's just the misconception, incorrect belief, and assumption and ignorance that there's separation. The idea of separation is imagined. It never was separate. We just imagined to be separate.
And then the body brings that idea of separation, doesn't it? Believing or the body.
No, well, the body is I would say really it's in the brain. It's within the conception that we come up with the idea of separate.
In the head, like.
Yeah. Because it's kind of like if you're used to seeing. I mean, if you see trees and you're used to them being separate, or at least having the idea that they're separate, and you go to a place like the Pando in Utah and you see this aspen forest with hundreds and hundreds of trees, and you go, well, how many trees do you see? Most people would naturally go, well, there's just there's hundreds. You can't even count them. But it's because they're going under the incorrect assumption based on their ignorance and misconception that each thing they see sticking out of the ground are separate. But the Pando is what they call a clonal colony. It's a contender for one of the world's largest organisms. It's one massive root structure with just stems sticking up everywhere. And this was proven not that long ago by science in terms of, for hundreds, if not thousands of years, people have assumed all these trees are separate. But then science comes around and goes, no, we've proven they're all one thing.
Wow.
And, but if you're not privy to that knowledge and understanding, you ask, how many trees do you see? People would say, oh, there's hundreds. It's acres and acres of woods. Because they simply don't know. It's their misconception built on an assumption based on ignorance, just not knowing what's really going on.
Yeah.
And that all happens in the concepts and through the brain of the body.
Yeah, that ignorance, it's nobody's fault, is it? I mean, because you stumbled on the Eckhart Tolle book and the video and yeah.
Ignorance isn't a bad thing. You don't want to vilify ignorance and go, ignorance is bad, we need to get rid of it, because, ignorance is what you need to set up any game, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine playing poker if everybody's hands were seen at all times. Poker would be very dull. It's fun because we don't know.
Yeah.
We're
all one, show me your hand.
Surprise parties are a great thing.
Yeah.
But you can't plan a surprise party for yourself. If you know about it, it's not going to be a surprise. A magician's illusions bring wonder because we don't know how it's done.
It's just so ridiculous. That's so
ignorance
ridiculous.
Is a great thing. But does it have a dark side and some does it have a dark side and some negatives? Yeah, we can cause ourselves suffering, we can cause ourselves misery just simply because we don't know.
Yeah. And it's okay not to know, because we grew up in a society, you have to know everything, You have to
Yeah.
gain knowledge, and you have to know the answers to the tests, and Jesus, it's like, it's a perfect con job in a way. Yeah, look, it
And
has
no
to be.
one
Yeah,
and no one's a master of everything, and no one is born a master in anything.
no,
It's all
no,
trial and error and a
absolutely,
lot of
yeah,
error.
yeah, and ignorant. People say often, just like just throw something in. They say, "Oh, you're ignorant." Well, we're all ignorant. There's nobody that knows everything, like you just said. You know.
Yeah.
There's a freedom in this, isn't there? Like, on about those trees, that there's no separate tree, that are all one as such. There's also a freedom, and there's an ease with being in with other people that resonate on this journey as well, isn't there? Like,
Yeah.
it's like we're all those trees together.
Yeah. There's a certain ease. I mean, it's for when, I guess, when people get together, when, I don't know how often it happens, but they say when a couple people understand this get together, there's usually you both kind of understand, what the other understood, in terms of that, it's not there's not a me, there's no separation, the conflict, the struggle, there's that's kind of fallen away.
Yeah.
And so, two people have their own inner peace and meet, and there's just this deep peace and contentment.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to defend a concept that I have, or, it's not a bit like, if this was a business meeting, we'd have agendas and opinions, and, I'd have to try and get my point across. It would be, contrived. But this is totally not that, like.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, most of the cases that I've heard or read about where they get together, yeah, there's really no agendas. A lot of times they end up just sitting in silence.
Yeah.
Because what more can be said if
Yeah.
both really know what's going on?
Yeah, the conversation goes on, and the questions are asked, and suddenly it's like a duck shoot. The ducks are all shot, and everybody's just silent. But yet the ego will kick off again tomorrow when there's another retreat. It will have another go, apparently. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, if enlightenment was a factual thing to get, wouldn't we already have got this wonderful thing? Why would it take so long for it to happen? It's ridiculous. Just thinking of abstract ideas about it. There are so many holes in the idea of the me, and the idea that you're going to get something. Because the clues are in the sense of being, aren't they? And the insights that we
Yeah.
have from that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's part of the reason it takes so long is much of what you said earlier, because we're looking outside, we're looking everywhere else. We're looking in all the wrong places.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if your glasses are up on your head and you go like, "Where are my glasses?" And you spend the day searching your house, your car, you're looking everywhere, but you just can't find them. Like, where are they? They're on your head. They've always been there. And until you can just be still and silent, i.e., quit looking anywhere else. Then that's the only time you really have a chance to see what is now as it is. And because they'll say, well, enlightenment is just simply seeing what is as it is. Well, the only way you can see what is as it is or otherwise is to look at what's going on now. If you're looking at everywhere else, where I've got to go, what happened in the past, these plans, these ideas, these concepts, you're looking everywhere but here.
Yeah.
And I think, when they talk about, well, why does it take so long for realization and enlightenment to happen? I go, it takes some people longer than others to exhaust themselves and finally quit looking everywhere else.
Yeah.
It took me 13 years to quit looking everywhere else. It didn't take me 13 years to wake up. It took me 13 years to quit looking everywhere else. Then I woke up.
Yeah.
If I didn't quit looking, it might have took 20, 30 years. Who
Yeah.
knows how long?
Start from the fact that you are that. I mean, there are a lot of teachers too, Eric, that would not go that way and tell the truth about that. They would keep it going for a long time. You have to do this practice and that practice and this, you know. There's a lot of that around as well, but you know, which I suppose is okay. But you know, to start from the fact that you are that, as you said,
You are that. You couldn't be otherwise.
mm,
And so enlightenment is just realizing that. And to realize that is an insight, a profound seeing, that what you thought you were, this me, doesn't really exist, and you aren't that. And that seeing through the me is the whole crux in my mind for what enlightenment and awakening is. And it has other effects, suffering falls away, things like that. But I always hesitate to call them benefits because sometimes I'll have people approach me and they go, well, what's the benefits of enlightenment? Why should I seek it? And I usually just brush it off and I go, if you don't know the answer to that, I'm not going to give you an answer. Just because I'm not trying to sell enlightenment, because as soon as I give benefits and go, well, this is why you should, well, let's say the person then gets intrigued and like, that sounds awesome, I'm going to seek it. Well, now there's a me seeking it, and who knows how long that's going to take before they finally hit the point of looking, they're going to be looking everywhere else for who knows how long.
Yeah.
And so usually when people ask about benefits, I'm like, don't ask about benefits. It doesn't matter. It's all about just being here, being now, being aware of what's going on, and ceasing all this other stuff and ceasing to look elsewhere. And if you're looking for a reason to do this, then I can't help you, because really, in the end, it's curiosity. Just, aren't you curious to know what really is?
Yeah.
Who you really are? If you're not curious to know who you really are, then you're not really interested in spirituality, because all of spirituality really boils down to figuring out who you are.
I mean, it's the most amazing question to ask yourself. It's the most valid question to ask. Well, who am I? Where did I come from? Really, how did this all happen or begin? Or, really, we're never taught it. We're all, as I said, we're given the advertising show and the materialism and all that stuff. And we're kind of captured in these concepts about this, that, and the other, and we have to get mortgages and better jobs and climb the corporate ladder, which is fine too. I mean, whatever, but we never look in, do we? I mean, the Eastern traditions spoke about this for eons, but the teachings through the internet now, we're getting those teachings now, which is refreshing, and it's wonderful. I never got the chance to read these books, I Am That and things like that, when I was younger. They weren't around, and if they were, I missed them. But it was religion, and it was these things to believe in,
These things to believe in, these things to practice. And off you go.
Yeah, I suppose everything is ripe for them to have a look and ask that wonderful question, like you said. What was it? It's like, who are you?
Just, who am I? What am I? And I mean, that is the basis of all spirituality. And I mean, yeah, someone can be so deep into suffering, it throws them into that question. Because I mean, even Eckhart Tolle will talk about, he was practically suicidal. He was going through deep depression, and the thought arose, I just can't live with myself anymore. And it just kind of stopped him. He goes, who's this me that can't live with myself anymore? Yeah. How can there be two me's? And that got him into that question of, well, who am I then?
Yeah.
I think Byron Katie and others have talked about that too, where they were deep in suffering and somehow introspection and who am I crept in.
Yeah.
But for me, and the pointer I like doing is, well, you don't really need suffering to drive you there. Just be curious. Who are you? Would you like to know what you really are? And that does involve kind of shaking up what you think you are currently, because people a lot of times, and that's part of the reason why it also takes so long, because a lot of people firmly believe they already know who and what they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm such and such. And when something is known, you cease looking. You really don't look at it anymore. It's now a known quantity. I know who I am. So you never look again. You never turn inward and look because I know who I am.
Yeah.
It's from a point of not knowing. I don't know. That's when we look. That's when we're open.
Yeah, and even people, I think Nisargadatta Maharaj, I like this one where he said, even to see into that and get to try and break that shell, the person knows who they are. He said something like, you believe you're the body. Some seeker said, he said to the seeker, who are you, or whatever. And the seeker said, I'm the body. Yet you're here looking for enlightenment and you believe you are the body. I mean, that even screams an answer.
Well, the thing is we so much do very, very superficial level of awareness and looking, and we don't question our own beliefs. Because I've had people, come to me and go, "Well, I am the body," and I'll go, "Okay, well, let's go under that assumption that you are. Are you all the body or just part of the body?" And they're like, "Well, no, I'm all the body." I'm like, "Okay, let's go with that." If you have a hair clipping or a nail clipping, are you less so? No, I'm not less so. I'm still me. I'm like, okay, those two parts you're not. And we start whittling away.
Yeah. Until you're left with nothing.
And they soon realize it's like, well, okay, well, if as a child you had a tonsillitis or appendicitis and you had tonsils or appendix removed, are you still me? Oh yeah, I don't. Okay, those are two organs that are not you. And you can whittle through organs and body parts and everything else. And it's like, okay, and as you keep looking, there's this point where you might realize I'm not here. There is no me here, and that's kind of where the neti comes in. You keep looking at and investigating until you can deeply, viscerally see and feel that I'm not this. And then you cease identifying with it. But yeah, a lot of people, they come from the idea that I'm the body. And then with that incorrect knowledge of who and what I am, they never look. Because as soon as I said, are you less so with a haircut or nail clipping? Well, no, they've never delved into it. They just stopped it. I'm the body. They never looked at it really deeply to investigate and question it.
It's astounding.
It's a sign of the times, really, because with modern era, because of all the stuff that's going on, all the noise and information and busy, we've gotten more and more superficial. We glance at things. We don't look at things very deeply.
Yeah, we're distracted a lot.
We're distracted a lot. As soon as we get a surface level glance at something, we go, "Oh, it's this," and then we move on to the next thing that's grabbing our attention.
The next shiny object, the next retreat, the next book, or which is part of it too, I'm sure, but. Yeah.
But with this superficial glancing at things, that's another reason why it takes so long, because we never stop and really look at ourselves, question what we think we are, and look deeply. We just stay with, well, I know I'm the body. Are you really? Ponder it.
Yeah.
I'm the mind. You can ponder the mind the same way, and you can whittle away, because the devil's in the details, as they say. If you can find a scenario where there wasn't there at some point, well, then you can no longer hold the idea that is what you are. Kind of like somebody will go, well, I'm thought. Well, have you ever been in the zone as an athlete? Have you ever been in awe? And at some point in your life, there's been periods where there's maybe not that long, might only been a minute, but there's been periods in your life where there wasn't a thought in your head for a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Did you cease to exist? No. Well, then you can't be that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's just finding, you're using your own experience. You got to use your own experience and make it kind of a visceral feeling. It's an experience. It's like experientially, viscerally, I know I'm not this because of these reasons. That's the other thing. We often try to make it a mental contemplation. And when you're keeping it at a mental level, it's never deep enough because the mind's so fickle. The mind can hold two contrary beliefs simultaneously. People hold two contrary beliefs all the time.
I never knew that.
And the mind can partition and keep them both. But the mind's fickle that way. So that's why mentally trying to hash it out, going, well, mentally I see that I'm not this. That's never what I'm ever talking about, because that's too shallow. You almost got to feel it in your gut, in your being, kind of, I know I'm not this because this,
And when that investigation is done, right? And I totally get that nitty approach. When that investigation is done, this clip is in my mind now from YouTube from Jeff Foster. I think somebody gave him a question. The heading of the YouTube video is "All that's left is laughter."
Mhm.
And someone, I think, said to him, I don't know why this has come up, but it's funny. When I become enlightened, what was it? When the ego is dropped, will I know that it's dropped? Something like that. Something like, when will I know that it's gone? But you'll never know. You'll never know when it's. But the thing about it is that there is no ego from this, and you touched on it, like a true teaching that isn't contrived and doesn't give you carrots to look to go for. The fact of it is that you are that from the off, and that there is no me from the off.
Yeah.
That's a fact. Like,
and you kind of know when the me and ego has been dropped, not because the thought no longer arises that there's a me, but that when the mind, through habit and conditioning, will inevitably, occasionally, especially at first, throw a thought of me up, it simply can't be believed. And that's what's laughed at. The mind will go, well, what about this? It pertains to me. And you're like, that's not me.
Yeah. It's reflected.
The mind becomes humorous because the old repetitive thought will throw up about a me, and that this is vital for a me, and it's like, but it's not a me, it's not me, and it's not vital, and that's what becomes humorous.
Yeah, all that's left is laughter. Yeah,
all it's kind of left is laughter, and I do find that over time the mind throws up less such thoughts, because again, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, the mind's a bit of a tanker in terms of new habits come in, and if you keep laughing at the idea of me as it arises, eventually the brain kind of goes, okay, I'm gonna quit referring to this because I don't like the ridicule. But
can't handle this. I'm leaving.
Well, I mean, the brain. I always say the brain is a friend. It really is trying to help, and it's operating off of the conditioning and habits and things you've put into it. And so, by the time we're adults, most of our thought is self-reflective, self-referential thoughts. And so even after awakening and enlightenment, those thoughts will still arise. But that awakening and enlightenment has probably happened when those thoughts arise, you don't believe them. It's like the thought arises and it's like, I know that's a thought. That's not me. It's kind of similar if someone walked up and tried to convince you that you're your kitchen fridge. You would never believe you're your kitchen fridge. It's a ridiculous thought. What do you mean I'm the fridge? No matter how many times somebody tried to convince you, it'd almost be more humorous. It's like, you really believe I'm the fridge? I mean, come on. And that's the way the mind operates. The mind will be going, no, I'm this. No, you're not. And the mind will slowly kind of catch on that these thoughts don't hold interest. And when thoughts don't hold interest, the brain kind of readjusts.
The belief in them, the glue, the belief kind of gives
the belief
way.
In them, the grabbing onto them. Kind of like what I was saying when in moments of silence, very attractive, seductive thoughts will arise because the brain's trying to help and you've wanted to know about this stuff in the past. And so especially at the beginning when you're doing meditation and such, you got to not hold on to them and go, oh yeah, that's something I wanted to remember. As soon as you start reinforcing the brain, you're now spinning that wheel of thought again and thoughts start building. Likewise, when the me arises, you can't grasp onto it. It's like, and the only way to not grasp onto it is really know that's not me. There is no me. If that's viscerally understood, no matter how much someone, even your own mind, tries to convince you that the me really does exist and is vitally important, you're just never going to buy it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of energy as well, sort of thing, as in looking inward to find or to drop the idea of the me. But I think it's come up for me because when I read Eckhart Tolle on my search 15 years ago, I think it was a power now. It was like keep it in the now, and I was trying to keep it in the moment. But there's a lot of energy in looking inwards in the moment, but try not to be here is a fantastic pointer too.
There's no way not to be, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that's just as powerful as looking at who's there or not there. Try not to be here. It's impossible. Yeah. I think that's it just counteracts because people can get hooked on the search, looking inwards. There's like a stay in the moment, keep it in the moment, meditate, keep it in the moment. There's a big energy
what
in
happens,
that.
What happens is there's a bit of a me trying to accomplish this. A me is trying to be present. But to what that question you said points to is there's no way to not be present. You don't have to do anything to be present.
Yeah, effortless.
And so as soon as you're trying to be present, you're already deviating from the present.
Yeah. So how do you counteract that?
If you're trying to be present in order to get something, you're already deviating from the present.
So how can you be present without trying to be present? I mean,
well, a lot of it is, like I said, it's turning it on its head. It's not so much trying to be present, rather than ceasing to try to be anywhere else, ceasing to worry about past, future, daydreams. Just go, I don't care about the past or future so much, or daydreaming. My biggest concern is now. And if now is your biggest concern, you'll be present.
Yeah.
But we're very much tied up on future seeking or the baggage of the past. And so a lot of these thoughts arise, and we grab onto them and we hold on to them. And that's what pulls us. The only thing that pulls us from the present is just our own thoughts about, past, present, or, past, future, daydreaming. You really can't think about the present, and so to just be present is just to be aware of the present as opposed to think about the present.
Yeah. And we can't get it wrong either. I mean, that's true too, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the message is to look inward, not outwards, to be present.
Look inwards, cease doing, quit trying to do so much. Just, be aware of what is here and now, and has always been the case.
Yeah. Eric, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's great talking to you. I enjoyed it. And
great talking to you too.
Yeah,
thank you.
And if you have a website, www.ericputkonen.
www.nondualitysimplified.com.
Non-duality simplified, is it?
Yeah,
okay,
that's the
the
website.
YouTube channel is Eric.
Yeah, the YouTube channel is just my name, Eric Putkonen.
Yeah, and people can reach you there, and you do retreats and Zooms or.
I do Zooms. I've been using Google Meet more, but retreats not so much. I haven't really gotten into that yet. I still host gatherings in my house. Actually, this Sunday I've got one. Some people coming over for a satsang in my house.
Cool.
Pretty much it's occasional home meetings, occasional online meetings, YouTube videos. That's kind of what I'm doing these days.
Okay. Well, we look forward to more.
Excellent. Well, thank you much.
So, Eric, thanks a lot, and take care, yeah?
Yep, you too.
Appreciate it.
Take care.